The plain and simple truth is, we've all been lied to. The reality is, we're all far more powerful than we could have ever imagined. The stories we tell ourselves are just that, stories. We've been taught by our family, friends, teachers, religion, and society to believe that we are not in control of our lives. We've been taught to believe that we're all just victims in one way or another, and that we're actually each living our lives just waiting for the next ball to drop. This, my friends, is the lie we've each been told and led to believe. And I'm here to tell you that this is simply not true, and that everything we've been taught to believe up to this point about ourselves is all just that, one big lie. My name is Joey Kramer, and in December of 2020, I rewrote my DNA. And in doing so, I have discovered the true power that lives within each of us, a power that's been forgotten about and pushed aside for many, many generations. You see, we've all been told to believe that who and what we are is just a compilation of our past experiences, the good, the bad, and in many cases, the very ugly. Reliving and remembering these events of our past is how each of us learns to form our own identity of ourselves. For most people, the present moment is exactly what they tell themselves it is, and they believe they are exactly who they think themselves to be. As for me, I've discovered that this is not true, and that our past does not shape our identity as we've all been led to believe, but rather, our past exists only to remind us of who and what we are. The past serves only as our teacher, guiding us as we grow and evolve in life. Our past allows us to understand many things, such as how to experience love, forgiveness, anger, and joy, just to name a few. Our past reveals to us the blueprint of our present moment, and it allows us to see into the future of who we are meant to become. I'm no more special than anyone else here, and I assure you, I've had my share of trauma and heartbreak. However, in the accepting and forgiving of my past, I discovered that all it really is just a collection of stories we tell ourselves and the lessons they provide us. In doing this, I realized that there is truly a superpower that exists within each of us, and it is simply waiting to be awoken from within. I'm now 42 years old, and for the first 40 years of my life, I lived in the belief that I was more or less, that life was out of my control. You see, the story I'd been telling myself was one of struggle, pain, and hardship. Abandoned by my biological father at birth was just the beginning of what I've come to realize was simply the start of this fantasy I've been so blessed to call my life. Suffering most of my life from depression like many, I sought comfort in the pain that I had experienced. As a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, I came to think of myself early on as a victim. Couple that with the abandonment I felt from my father made me truly think I was incapable of ever receiving or even understanding what real love was. As I reached puberty, I developed nervous facial tics, which I would later be told was a symptom of Tourette's syndrome. So, if you notice me sniffling or blinking more than often, that's what that is. Add to that, I became addicted to alcohol, drugs, and even sex, and had created the perfect combination of self-destruction and hate. Like most people, my addiction served as an escape from my pain and was all the justification I needed to destroy myself and blame myself for the lack of success I had in life. A pivotal moment came just before I turned 21, when I had finally decided I'd had enough of this perceived pain I was living with. That's when I attempted for the first time to take my own life. After a night of heavy drinking, I decided that this was as good a time as any to finally make my exit. I calmly drove my friend home after the bar had closed, just as I'd done many times before. However, this time, before dropping him off, I made a quick stop by the gas station where I picked up a pack of 24 Tylenol PM and 48 no-dose tablets, which I thought was sure to do the trick. I had decided I was done living with this pain, so I went home and swallowed them all. By the grace of God, I awoke the next day in the ICU after having been brought to the hospital by my ex-girlfriend, whom I'd apparently called after finishing off all the pills. I was very lucky, the doctors said. Another 15 minutes and my liver and kidneys would have shut down and basically exploded, and that would have been it. Fortunately, they pumped my stomach that night and in turn saved my life. As if that wasn't enough for me to learn my lesson, sadly I spent another 15 years trying to figure this whole thing out. In the meantime, I got married, went through a brutal divorce, and came inches away from suicide yet again. Once in my mid-20s and again in my mid-30s, both times now involving loaded guns. Again, I was rescued by the grace of God and the love of my friends. I continue to find myself searching deeper and deeper for answers that just never seem to come. Or at least, that was the story I continued playing over and over in my mind. It was the lie I'd chosen to tell myself about the pain I had experienced throughout my life. At least, that was the case up until the time I met and married my amazing wife, April, in December of 2015. It was then that I began to discover the love that I had been searching so hard to find. Now, this is the point in my story where everything begins to turn around and it really starts getting good. In 2014, I finally began putting those pieces of my life back together after my divorce. And through this process, I discovered a power that has always lived within inside me and has always existed. This same power, it exists for each and every one of you. I began taking responsibility for my past and I started my process of healing. My journey, as I said earlier, has truly been one of fantasy. And looking back on it, I wouldn't have changed a single moment, even if I could. I see now, and I understand that every single thing that has happened to me had to happen to me in that exact way, so that I would learn the lessons I came here to be taught. And those lessons have led me to discover this power that we each have. And it all began when I finally chose to love myself and all that I am, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Over the past 24 months, I've been transforming myself into the man I was always destined to become. I simply was unable before to see past all the pain and all the bullshit of the story I'd been choosing to live in. I finally began to see the grace and the beauty that my life has given me. I was ready to commit to creating the reality I desired instead of just going through the motions and believing the lies I was telling myself. I decided I would no longer live life on anyone else's terms but my own. I realized that I am truly the one in control of my life and of my future, and that all the events of my past had actually helped to form and create the man you see before you today. My journey has truly transformed my life and the lives of all those around me. I now live with such gratitude for each and every moment as I see the true grace behind my past. In the last year and a half alone, I have been evolving at such an amazing and unbelievable rate. Over that time, I've read just shy of 300 books. I attended 6 Tony Robbins seminars, and I created and helped my wife build a successful and e-commerce business. And that's now inspiring creativity and joy for people around the world through the love of their pets. In addition to all this, I also performed a small little miracle in the rewriting of my DNA, which in turn also helped me to rewrite my genetic coding and has allowed me to increase my testosterone levels, which are now measuring off the chart. So you're probably wondering by now the same question I'm always asked. How exactly did I rewrite my DNA? Well, that's the best part of this story, and to be honest, I wouldn't have believed it if it didn't actually happen to me. As I mentioned, last year I attended 6 Tony Robbins events over the course of 9 months, and one of those events was his Date with Destiny seminar. I entered into that event with one single purpose in mind. I was going to remove the anger I'd been living my life with, and it still raged within me. This was the last piece of the puzzle that was holding me back from finding my true success. Having conquered nearly all my other demons, this was the one still causing me the most pain and was keeping me from reaching my true destiny. After the first day of the event, I realized that all this pent-up anger and rage I had felt my entire life had actually stemmed from this feeling of abandonment that I had, all due to my biological father leaving my mom and me at birth. I realized that all this pain and misery I had imposed on myself was actually due to this story I had created and that I had convinced myself to believe for the past 41 years. The fact was, turns out it was just that, a collection of stories I'd chosen to replay in my mind over and over again. So on the morning of the second day, I decided I would write a letter to my biological father and forgive him for all this anger I had about his leaving. I was seeing now that this event and the subsequent events in my life actually had nothing to do with him and everything to do with me. He was not the cause of my pain, but rather just a lie I had created to shield myself from my own shortcomings. Needless to say, I didn't even make it through one sentence and I broke down and I cried for an hour straight like I had never cried before. Such a weight had been lifted off of me. I finally gathered my composure and I looked back at that letter I had attempted to write and I realized there was no longer any need to actually write that letter. The only person I really needed to forgive was me for the lies I had tricked myself into believing for 41 years now. So fast forward to day 5 of this seminar, this event, which day 5 is known as Transformation Day. And that night, we performed a meditation exercise where we all would go back and recall our earliest childhood memory. What appeared to me was an event I had long forgotten about. I saw myself as a 5-year-old boy, and I was on a trip with my mom down to Texas to visit my biological father in an attempt to win him back. We first started off the meditation by going back to this moment and placing ourselves into the bodies of the people there. I began reliving and seeing exactly what I was doing and what I was feeling at that time. We were told to remember what we were thinking prior to the event happening. For me, I was just a small little boy who wanted desperately to have a father. I remembered how much I wanted this, to feel loved, to be normal, to be like the other kids I knew with dads. It was at that moment I then began to feel the fear and the anxiety of that situation. I thought to myself, what if I screwed this up? What if he didn't love me? I remembered how I felt, as if this was all on me, and if he didn't come home, it would ultimately be my fault. I then realized, wow, what an amazing amount of pressure I had put on myself at 5 years old for something I couldn't even have controlled. I watched myself as I played on the jungle gym and climbing on the monkey bars, all the while thinking, am I good enough for him? Is he seeing what an amazing son I am? I thought to myself, if I was perfect, then surely that would be all he would need, and it would make him want to come home and be my dad. Next, we were told to put ourselves into the other person's body and to see and feel what they were thinking and feeling. As I began to see and feel through my mother's eyes, I could feel her pain and I could feel her fear. I now understood that all she ever wanted was to give me, her only son, a real father. She wanted me to be loved by this man. I truly felt her struggle with this idea, since he had hurt her so badly when he left us initially, but she didn't know where else to go or what else to do. I felt her searching for something more from him, desperately wanting his love for both of us. I realized the pressure she must have been under and that the pain she had suffered from the trust that was lost long ago. I felt her willingness to try anything in order to reunite our family. feeling this, I began to cry for her and for her struggle. Lastly, we were asked to now put ourselves into the other person's body and mind, if there was a third person. And it was at that moment I entered into my father's body and into his mind, and I instantly felt his pain and the stress from this meeting. I saw through his eyes the fear he had about coming back and being a husband and a father. The fact is, he ran away to Texas to escape his responsibilities as a husband and a father, and now we were here trying to control his life and to convince him that his place was back home with us. I experienced what he felt at that moment, and I saw what he saw. It was only then that I realized we were all just afraid of each other, each wanting something from one another that we were unable to have or to give at that moment. When we completed the exercise, I was no longer the person I had just been a few minutes before. I had seen and felt true compassion, and I now understood the meaning of true forgiveness. Needless to say, that trip ended with my mom and me returning home, her still without a husband and me still without a father. The Date with Destiny event ended the next day, and it took me another 2 days before I could find the courage to call my mom up and explain to her what I had just experienced. I started by telling her how much I loved her and that I forgave her for anything she thought she had done wrong in raising me. I also forgave myself for the story I'd been telling of that scared little boy within me all these years ago, and for the lie I had been choosing to live with. I explained to her how everything she had done was exactly the way it needed to be for me to become the man I am today. I thanked her and I told her how much I appreciated everything she had done for me. She told me she wished at times she would have been a little harder on me, but I responded to her in saying, "You did everything exactly right, in the exact way it needed to be done." I reminded her just how fragile I was back then, and how, in all likelihood, if she had been any harder on me, I probably would have broken, and I probably would have crumbled. At that point in our conversation, the tears were flowing from both of us, and that's when she paused and said to me, "There's something I have to tell you." She said that she'd been keeping a secret from me for 41 years now, and that it was only known by 3 other people in the whole world: my stepfather, Bill, my biological father, Robert, and my Uncle John, who had passed away a year before. She said that it was a secret she was determined that they would take with them to the grave. This secret had been weighing on her for the past 41 years, and she was now ready to release herself from that pain as she began to tell me the truth. Through her tears, she said, "Robert is not my father." It got very quiet for a moment, and I thought, wait a minute, what did she just say? Now keep in mind, at this point, there's literally nothing anyone could say or do to me now that could have shaken me, at least not after what I'd just gone through at the Date with Destiny event. But at this moment, I was truly being tested. Thankfully, I was now at peace with everything, and I excitedly responded to her with a smile. "Go on." She began to tell me how badly she wanted a child and that Robert was unable to bear children. So in her attempts, she sought out every possible path for her to have her own child. She even went as far as the Colombian embassy to see about adopting an orphan. Now at this point, I had to interrupt her. In my amazement, I asked, wait a minute. Is that why I tan so easily and I'm the only one in my family with blue eyes? Are you saying I'm half Colombian? And she sobbingly responded, no. She continued on to tell me that she had worked out at a local hospital in Kansas City, and it was there they were doing a new experimental procedure back in 1978 known as in vitro fertilization. She had enrolled in the experiment, and both her and Robert signed all of the confidentiality paperwork. It was at that moment that I discovered that I was not the son of this alcoholic, womanizing man who had abandoned me at birth. In fact, it was the exact opposite. She went on to reveal to me that I was actually the biological son of a med student who later became a doctor at the hospital. I was blown away by this information, and at that moment I realized what just happened. I literally, in real time, rewrote my entire life story, including my biological DNA. I now understood that the story I'd been telling myself was now all just one big lie. The man I blamed my entire life for all the pain and suffering was only just my mom's first husband, nothing more. I discovered that through my own forgiveness and acceptance of my past, I was able to completely rewrite it. And not just my entire past and future, but now the past and the future of my children have also been rewritten as well, as they are now the biological grandsons of a doctor. As if all of this wasn't amazing enough of a transformation, in addition, I was also able to set my mom free from the secret and the lie she had been forced to carry silently with her for the past 41 years. In taking responsibility for my past and forgiving myself, including all those involved, I unleashed a power within me, one that had the ability to create and write the story of my choosing. For each of us, our lives are being lived right here and right now, in this exact moment. And the truth is, there's only this moment and nothing else. By dwelling on the past and blaming ourselves and others for our failed results, we're only continuing to live in the lie that we've been taught to believe. Each of us have this amazing power and ability to decide exactly how our story's going to play out and how it will be written. So remember, it's not the story of our past that defines us, but the story of our future that's being written right now, right in front of our eyes. Through the power of forgiveness and compassion, I learned that we can each discover a greatness that's buried within us all. When we stop allowing the story to define us and we begin to harness the reality that our imagination and our desire can create, only then can we begin to rewrite the lies of our past and create a future of fantasy in any way we choose. In closing, I have one question for each of you to ask yourselves as you leave here today. And that question is, how will you choose to write the script and the story of your life? We each have this power. Will you choose to embrace it and write your own story, or will you continue to let yours be written for you?